This is a sweet little stereo, an 8-track player from the 70s, made in Japan, and if you were a hippie in the 70s, you probably had one of these. They started out in the car, and they brought them into the home for use, the 8-track. Anyway, this one has some neat features. Let's take a look at it. Let's open it up. So yes, this is from the 70s, and if you had one of these, you were probably listening to the Beatles, Queen, Aerosmith, all those types of bands. Anyway, this works. Let me plug it in. I don't have any speakers hooked up, but trust me, it works. Now I have a bulb out here, a bulb on number 4, and there's a couple missing in the tuner section for the light. Anyway, we can take care of those things, and you can run a decent pair of, like stereo speakers. I have it hooked up to a couple big car ones. I'll show them to you. This is one of 2, and they're 8-ohm speakers. And because of copyright issues, I can't play music. Sorry. In addition to the 8-track player, it also had a tuner, and this one is AM/FM radio. And it also had an amplifier selection, and there's inputs on the back of this, so you could plug in inputs and use this amplifier to play different optional equipment. Here's a view from the back, and typically what you had is you had your left and right channels, and then you had your inputs for optional things like a record player, things like that. And then you had a couple lugs for your FM antenna if you wanted to put an external antenna on it. And then of course your power cord. Now this has a pretty unique lid on it. You take out these screws, there's 3 of them. And then it just slides back and up. It's like a piece of furniture. It's wood. Made in Japan, 12th of 72. So 12th month of 1972, the 7th day. It's got some age to it. Looks pretty neat on the inside. The first thing that jumps out at you is this big wheel. What is it? Well, if you turn it, that's what's connected to the tuner for the AM/FM radio. So the radio and the amplifier would be over in this area, and this is all tape player mechanism. We'll look at it in detail. It's a pretty beefy transformer. It's probably a 12 volt. If you notice, this is a belt drive system, and it's got this big pulley on it, and it acts like a flywheel to keep it rotating, because if you're playing tunes, you might be playing for a while, so this thing has to sit there and spin a long time. And it's just easier on the motor if you have a flywheel, something to keep the mass turning. And it also is for the reduction. Something to note about 8-tracks is they have sensors on them, and there's a piece of metal tape that's glued to the tape where they want to change the track, and there's a sensor down in here. We'll see if we can find it. I think this is the sensor that tells it you put the tape in, but there's another one that rides down where the head is, and when the magnetic tape runs over the top of it, it advances the relay and moves the head 1 notch down, and when it starts at 1, it goes to 4, and then it repeats back up to 1. So it just click, 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 click. And the head's down in here. We'll see if we can see it too. See if I can get a closer look at it. Yes, this switch right here is just 2 pieces of metal that are apart. And when you put your tape in there, down here, it pushes those blades together, and makes these two wires contact. So that's a little switch that tells it that you put a tape in. I bet if we press on there, something will happen. Let's try it. Okay, it's on. Now let's just press that with something. Look at there. So that senses the tape when you put it in. And this is that big wheel that I was showing you earlier that's connected to the tuning section. And if we look on the other side of this board, we'll see that there's a adjustable pot underneath this that has wipers in it, like a variable capacitor. And this is how you would tune your stations, the RF signal. Back here, when I turn it on, you can see these lights, and there's supposed to be two more here, and they're burned out. Let's look at that light for channel 4. This bulb. And they actually made these so you could replace them. You just grab them and pull them. See? This is like a little, maybe 12-volt bulb. It's called a wheat bulb miniature. A wheat miniature bulb. That's what they call them. Why they call them wheat, I have no idea. Put it in the comments. And I noticed this bulb is a little bit different. That's a red one. And if we follow that up to the control panel, there's a stereo thing that's lit up in here in red that tells you when you're on a stereo signal. So look at there, all these lamps come back and they come back to this common point. And they have these solder terminals just sticking out in the middle of nowhere. That wouldn't be done today like that, would it? I mean, there's nothing wrong with construction like this, but you just don't see it anymore. It's just kind of how you doing, you know? But there's probably a positive for each one of these lamps and then a common negative, I'm guessing. I'm zoomed in there so hopefully you can see the head moving. It's up all the way. And what would happen after a while is, especially with the cheaper recorders, or players rather, they would become out of alignment and it would be in between tracks. And if you didn't know enough to come in here and fix it, you would stick a matchbook underneath a tape and that would change the speed and the position of the heads. But really all you had to do is take the cover off and adjust the screw down in here, but most people didn't know that. This is kind of like a carriage system. It goes up and down, and there's predetermined stops, and it just gets out of whack after a while from the jolting. And this would be the circuit to power that relay that's under here. See if we can see that. You can just see the coils here, that blue part, and the relay would be under here. If you've ever taken a coil of wire and wrapped it around a nail and energized it and made an electromagnet, that's basically what that is to move this up and down. It just pulls it in and it has a spring to reset. Very simple. And just under here you can see two wires connected to this black thing. That's the actual piece that is there to catch the magnetic tape running by, and if it sees it, it advances. So this is a magnetic switch. It's basically two pieces of metal that wait for a signal to short it out. Back on this tuner section, and I was thinking, why are these springs here? And I've seen this before, but I never really stopped to think why they're there. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you turn the dial too far and it stalls out, like I'm at the end right now, if I turn it, see how the springs are moving a little bit? I think it's so it won't become out of, basically so the dial don't move and the pot does and it becomes out of sync. Does that make sense? It's calibrated. Sort of. It's sort of calibrated to the dial on the front. When you turn it, it just pulls it on a string. Maybe we can see that. Let's look. You can see it moving here, but you can't really see what I'm talking about. The strings pulling it along. We'll look at the bottom of that too. It's funny how much of this mechanical stuff's gone away. This is kind of unique how this bottom opens as well. It's like a fiber board. They probably thought this was heat resistant. Anyway, here's all the electronic components and probably the parts that will shock you as well. Let's get in for a tighter look. In case someone's interested in exactly what this is. Look, it even has its own serial number. Ooh. I don't think they bother doing that anymore, do they? So the way they have this divided up, it's basically this is the RF or the radio portion, this is the amplifier portion, and then the rest is just tape player. Right down in here are the drive transistors for the amplifier. There's actually 4 of them down in there. Where's my finger? 1, 2, 3, 4. And these are PNP and NPN transistors. And they work on a, I think it's called push-pull, where one's turning on and one's turning off, and it boosts the signal through amplification. And there's a pair for this side, for the left, and a pair for the right. And I believe the Class B amplifier is based on that. But basically, that's your amplifier with some supporting components around it. It's about a 15 watt, I would say. It's actually pretty loud. You'd be surprised what 15 watts can put out. Really, I say this is like maybe 15, maybe 20 watts, but really something that was marked 20 watts in the 70s is nothing in comparison of something marked of the same today. There's no comparison. This stuff's much more powerful. Just is. The components are beefier and it was just made better. This thing has very few electrolytic capacitors. It has a few. But it has a bunch of ceramics in it as well, and those things last a long time. That's why something 40 years old, you can just turn it on and it works. Try that to something new in 40 years of today. There's a package here and there's a package here, and one of them is a stereo decoder and the other one is a amplifier for the RF section. So one of them's boosting the RF signal that comes through the radio, and the other is creating our stereo RF, our decoder. It's called stereo decoder. That's what the part said anyway. Sanyo, let's see. I believe that's the decoder, the stereo decoder chip. So exactly what that did, I'm not sure. Something to do with decoding the stereo. Maybe it probably comes in as FM and it takes the signal and splits it to left and right. Maybe. Is that what it does? Looking at the top of these caps, they look pretty good. No swelling after 35, 40 years. Looks like they used to have to tune these with these pots, and then they put resin on them. Probably for the RF section of this. Look how they put these diodes up on angle. So, was that to save space, or was there another reason behind that? It looks like it's just the diodes. All the rest of this stuff is normal mounted. You would think at first they did it to save space, but maybe not. Maybe there's another reason. Looks like these two resistors here turned up too, don't it? So I'm guessing too that that chip that was down in there was also for these automatic frequency control. If you remember, the FM stereo had two selections, and one of them was the AFC, and that stands for automatic frequency control. Because if you used FM without it, the signal could drift in and out. So I bet that chip, that modulator was also for the AFC. Yeah, I forgot about that. Look, 8-track. That would be for another tape player or phonograph. And then AM. And this is just the, it's not left or right or nothing like that. That's over here, the balance. So really simple, but a really good system, and it's good just to turn this on and let it play tunes all day. You'd never have to rewind the tape. That was the nice thing about it. Remember those guys? Played at every wedding ever made. Raindrops keep falling on my head. Old Diana Ross was quite the looker, wasn't she? Look at her with her blouse unbuttoned there, trying to sell more tapes. And it worked. Remember Crystal Gayle? Hey, what do you want? I found these at a Goodwill store. They were $1 each. I'm still on the hunt for some good ones like Boston, Aerosmith, Foghat, Kiss. Those are the ones I want, not these, not ABBA. Trade you a Kiss for an ABBA. I managed to stop this tape as it was switching tracks. And look, you can see the foil that makes that happen. They put this foil on the tape where they want the track to switch. And when the magnetic fingers feel this tape, it makes it switch. And when they made this tape, they were able to put those contacts wherever they wanted. And what they generally did is, like if they had 30 minutes worth of tape in here, they would divide it among the 4 tracks. This one, you can see each track, there's 4 tracks on this one, and each one is roughly 10 minutes, about 10 minutes and 40 seconds worth. The first one's a little bit longer, 10 minutes 16. But that divides out the tape equally among the 4 tracks. Let's put our tape in. So it's funny, you had the 8-track, and then the cassette killed that, and then the CD killed that, and then the MP3 killed that. It's like the food chain of electronics. What's next? Thanks for watching.